The smoke was everywhere. Ashley couldn't see the door anymore. She couldn't see anything except the thick, black wall of smoke that had swallowed her apartment whole, turning the familiar space into a nightmare she couldn't escape. The heat pressed against her skin like a living thing, stealing the air from her lungs with every desperate breath she tried to take. She had woken to the sound of breaking glass somewhere below her, followed by the shriek of the fire alarm that had sent her stumbling out of bed at 2 a.m. By the time she'd grabbed her phone and made it to the bedroom door, the hallway was already filled with smoke so dense it burned her eyes and made her double over coughing. Now she was trapped. She had tried the window, but it wouldn't budge. Painted shut years ago by some lazy maintenance crew who never thought about what might happen if someone needed to escape. She had tried the door again, but the handle was hot enough to sear her palm, and when she'd opened it just a crack, flames had licked toward her with hungry orange tongues that sent her scrambling backward. Ashley pressed herself into the corner of her bedroom, as far from the door as she could get, and pulled her t-shirt up over her nose and mouth. It didn't help. Nothing helped. The smoke was getting thicker, the heat more intense, and she could feel herself getting dizzy, her thoughts starting to scatter like startled birds. She was going to die here. The realization hit her with a cold certainty that cut through even the heat of the fire. She was 26 years old, and she was going to die in her apartment, alone, in the middle of the night, because of a fire she hadn't started and couldn't escape. She thought about her mother, who would get a phone call in a few hours that would destroy her. She thought about her best friend Megan, who she was supposed to meet for brunch on Sunday. She thought about all the things she hadn't done yet, the places she hadn't traveled, the career she was still building, the love she hadn't found. And then she heard it. A crash, loud, close, someone shouting. Ashley tried to call out, but her voice came out as nothing more than a hoarse croak, swallowed by the roar of the fire and the persistent scream of the alarm. She tried again, forcing sound past her raw throat. "Help." It was barely a whisper. "Please, help me." The bedroom door burst open, and through the smoke and flames a figure appeared. Broad shoulders, yellow turnout gear, a mask that made him look like something from another world. He moved through the fire like it was nothing, crossing the room in 3 long strides, and suddenly he was there, right in front of her, pulling his mask off and pressing it over her face. "I've got you. Can you walk?" Ashley shook her head, her legs giving out beneath her as the clean air from his mask hit her starved lungs. She couldn't walk. She couldn't do anything except cling to the oxygen he was giving her and try not to pass out. "That's okay. I've got you. Hold on to me." And then she was in his arms, lifted like she weighed nothing at all, her face pressed against the rough fabric of his turnout coat as he turned and carried her back toward the door. She could feel the heat intensifying as they moved through the hallway, could hear the crack and groan of the building around them, but he never hesitated, never slowed down. She kept her eyes squeezed shut, breathing through his mask, letting him carry her through the inferno like some kind of guardian angel in yellow and black. The night air hit her like a blessing when they finally made it outside, cool and clean and mercifully free of smoke. Ashley gasped, pulling the mask away from her face so she could breathe it in. And that's when she opened her eyes. He was still there. The firefighter who had carried her out of the burning building was setting her down on the grass near the ambulance, but gently, carefully, like she was something precious he didn't want to break. And he wasn't leaving. Even as the paramedics rushed over, even as other firefighters shouted instructions and hoses sprayed water at the flames still consuming her building, he stayed. She could see his face now. Strong jaw, covered in soot. Blue eyes that caught the flashing lights of the emergency vehicles. Dark hair, damp with sweat, plastered to his forehead. He was young, maybe early 30s, and he was looking at her with an expression of such genuine concern that it made something twist in her chest. "You're going to be okay. The paramedics are going to take care of you now." Ashley tried to speak, but all that came out was another cough, her body still trying to expel the smoke she'd inhaled. The paramedics descended on her, checking her oxygen levels, shining lights in her eyes, asking questions she could barely process. But through it all, she kept looking for him. The firefighter with the blue eyes who had walked through fire to save her. And every time she found him, directing other firefighters, helping evacuated residents, consulting with the fire chief, he would glance back at her, just to check, just to make sure she was still there. She didn't even know his name. The paramedics loaded her into the ambulance, and Ashley craned her neck to look out the back doors as they closed. He was standing there, watching her go, one hand raised in a small wave, and then he was gone. 3 days later, Ashley was still thinking about him. She was staying with Megan temporarily, sleeping on her best friend's couch because she had nowhere else to go. Everything she owned was gone, reduced to ash and rubble in a fire that investigators said had started in the apartment below hers, caused by faulty wiring that the building's landlord had ignored for years. She had insurance, technically, but the claims process was a nightmare of paperwork and phone calls and waiting. She had no clothes except what Megan had lent her. No computer, no books, no photos of her family, no keepsakes from her grandmother. Nothing. But that wasn't what kept her awake at night. It was him, the firefighter. The way he'd looked at her. The way he'd stayed even when his job was done. The way he'd waved as the ambulance doors closed, like he didn't want to let her go. Ashley knew it was probably nothing. He was probably like that with everyone he rescued. It was probably just part of being a good firefighter, making people feel safe, making them feel seen. It didn't mean anything, but she couldn't stop thinking about it, about him. "You should go thank him," Megan said on the 4th day, watching Ashley stare at her untouched coffee with a knowing look. "To the fire station, in person." "I can't just show up at a fire station." "Why not? He saved your life. Bringing cookies or something would be completely normal." "What if he thinks I'm weird? What if he doesn't even remember me?" Megan raised an eyebrow. "You almost died in a fire 4 days ago. I think he remembers you." Ashley chewed her lip. The truth was, she wanted to see him again. She wanted it more than she'd wanted anything in a long time, and that scared her. She didn't know this man. She didn't know anything about him except that he'd carried her out of a burning building and looked at her like she mattered. Was that enough? Was that real? Or was this just some kind of trauma response? Her brain attaching to the first person who'd made her feel safe after the worst night of her life? She didn't know, but she knew she had to find out. The fire station was a large brick building with 3 big red garage doors and a sign that read, "Station 47" in bold letters. Ashley stood outside for a full 5 minutes, clutching a box of homemade brownies and trying to convince herself to go inside. This was ridiculous. She was being ridiculous. She should just leave the brownies with whoever, answer the door, say thank you, and go. There was no reason to expect him to be there. There was no reason to expect anything. She pushed open the door anyway. The interior was cleaner than she'd expected. A large common room with a kitchen area, a long dining table, and several couches arranged around a television. A few firefighters were scattered around, some eating lunch, some reading, one working on what looked like equipment maintenance. And there, at the dining table, was him. He looked up when she walked in, and Ashley watched recognition dawn across his face. He stood immediately, pushing back his chair, and she saw him take a breath like he was steadying himself. "It's you, from the fire on Maple Street." "You remember?" "Of course I remember. I've been wondering how you were doing. Are you okay? Did you recover from the smoke inhalation?" Ashley nodded, suddenly aware that every other firefighter in the room had stopped what they were doing to watch this exchange. She felt her cheeks flush. "I'm fine. I mean, I lost everything, but I'm alive. Because of you." She held out the box of brownies like a shield. "I wanted to say thank you, properly, so I made these. They're brownies. I know that's probably not enough for, saving my life, but..." He took the box from her hands, and when his fingers brushed against hers, she felt it like an electric shock. "You didn't have to do this. I was just doing my job." "You walked into a burning building for me. That's more than a job." Something shifted in his expression, something softer, more personal. "I'm Christopher, by the way. Christopher Whitfield. I should have told you that night, but things were a little hectic." "I'm Ashley. Ashley Brennan. I should have asked." For a moment, they just stood there, looking at each other, the box of brownies between them like some kind of bridge. Ashley was acutely aware of her heart pounding, of the other firefighters pretending not to watch, of how absurd this whole situation was. She'd come to say thank you. She should say thank you and leave. "I should probably go. I don't want to interrupt your..." "No, don't. I mean..." He paused, seemed to catch himself. "Would you want to stay for a bit? Have some coffee? I'd actually love to hear how you're doing. Really." Ashley knew she should say no. She'd done what she came to do. There was no reason to stay. But his eyes were so blue, and he was looking at her like she was the only person in the room, and she heard herself say yes before she could stop herself. They sat at the dining table with cups of coffee, and Christopher listened as she told him about the aftermath of the fire, about losing everything, about staying with Megan, about the insurance company that kept putting her on hold, and the landlord who was trying to dodge responsibility. He listened like he actually cared. Not the polite, distant caring of someone being professional, but real caring. The kind that made her feel like what she was saying actually mattered. "Do you have a lawyer for the landlord situation?" "I can't afford a lawyer. I'm barely affording to eat right now." "That's not right. He ignored faulty wiring. That's negligence. You could have died because of him." "I know, but it's not like I have a lot of options." Christopher was quiet for a moment, his jaw tight. Then he pulled out his phone and typed something quickly. "I'm texting you a name. My cousin's wife is a lawyer. She does tenant rights stuff. She'd probably take your case on contingency. At least talk to her." Ashley stared at him. "You don't have to do that." "I want to. What happened to you was wrong, and you deserve someone who's going to fight for you." The way he said it, like it was obvious, like, of course, she deserved that, made something warm bloom in Ashley's chest. She looked down at her coffee, trying to hide the emotions crossing her face. "Why are you being so nice to me?" "Because you seem like someone worth being nice to." She looked up and found him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Something vulnerable, something hopeful. An alarm blared through the station, loud and insistent, and Christopher was on his feet instantly, his whole demeanor shifting from gentle to alert in a heartbeat. "I have to go. I'm sorry." "Go. Save someone else." He paused at the door, looking back at her with those blue eyes. "Would you maybe want to get coffee sometime? Not in a fire station, just normal coffee?" Ashley felt her heart skip. "I'd like that." He smiled, a real smile, warm and genuine. And then he was gone, running toward the garage bay with the other firefighters while the alarm continued to wail. Ashley sat at the table for a long moment, her hands wrapped around her cooling coffee, and wondered what she'd just agreed to. Their first real date was 4 days later, at a small coffee shop halfway between Megan's apartment and the fire station. Ashley arrived 15 minutes early because she was nervous, then spent those 15 minutes pretending to read the menu and trying not to watch the door. When Christopher walked in, her stomach did a little flip. He looked different out of his firefighter gear, softer somehow. He was wearing jeans and a gray sweater that made his eyes look even bluer, and when he spotted her, his face broke into a smile that made her feel like the most important person in the room. "You came. Did you think I wouldn't?" "I wasn't sure. I know this is kind of an unusual situation." Ashley laughed, surprising herself. "You mean how we met when you carried me out of a burning building? Yeah, that's a little unusual." He sat down across from her, and for a moment they just looked at each other. Ashley was suddenly aware of all the things she didn't know about him. His favorite food, his family, what he was like when he wasn't saving people's lives. "Tell me something about yourself. Something that has nothing to do with firefighting." Christopher considered this, his head tilting slightly. "I collect vintage records, like actual vinyl. I have a turntable at my apartment and probably 300 albums that I never have time to listen to because I'm always at the station." "That's amazing. What kind of music?" "Everything. Classic rock, jazz, some old country. I've got this original pressing of Fleetwood Mac's Rumors that my grandfather gave me. It's probably worth more than my car." Ashley leaned forward, genuinely interested. "How did you get into that?" "My grandfather, he used to play records for me when I was a kid. Said there was something about the sound, the warmth of it, the tiny imperfections. He said digital music was too perfect, too cold. He wanted music that felt alive." He talked about his grandfather for a while, how the man had raised him after his parents' divorce, how he'd passed away 3 years ago, how Christopher still went to estate sales and thrift stores looking for records because it made him feel close to him. Ashley listened, watching the way his face softened when he talked about someone he loved. This wasn't the professional, focused firefighter she'd met that night. This was someone else entirely. Someone with depths she wanted to explore. "He sounds wonderful." He was. He's the reason I became a firefighter, actually. He was one back in the day. Served 30 years before retiring. Used to tell me stories about the people he saved, the calls that went wrong, all of it. I grew up wanting to be just like him. "Do you love it, the job?" "I love helping people. I love being there when someone's having the worst day of their life and being able to make it better. But it's hard, too. The things you see, the ones you can't save." His expression shifted, something dark flickering behind his eyes, and Ashley recognized the look. She'd seen it in the mirror, in the days after the fire, when she'd wake up gasping from nightmares of smoke and flames. "You don't have to talk about it if you don't want to." "No, it's okay. It's just not first date conversation usually." I almost died 4 days ago. I think we're past usually. That got a small smile out of him. Fair point. They talked for 3 hours about his job and her job. She worked in marketing for a small nonprofit, which she loved despite the terrible pay. About their families, her mother in Ohio, his scattered across 3 states. About their friends, their hobbies, their embarrassing high school stories. By the time the coffee shop started closing, Ashley realized she hadn't thought about the fire once. She'd been too busy laughing at Christopher's impression of his captain, too busy telling him about the time she accidentally sent a company-wide email that was meant for her best friend, too busy feeling like herself again for the first time since the night her life burned down around her. I should probably let you go. Megan's going to think I've been kidnapped. Yeah, I've got an early shift tomorrow. He paused, then looked at her with that same vulnerable expression from the fire station. Can I see you again? Ashley smiled. I'd like that. They saw each other again, and again, and again. Over the next few weeks, Christopher became the brightest spot in the chaos of Ashley's life. While she dealt with insurance adjusters and temporary housing searches and the slow, painful process of rebuilding from nothing, he was there, texting her good morning, bringing her dinner when she forgot to eat, listening when she needed to talk about something other than fire damage estimates. His schedule was unpredictable, 24 hours on, 48 hours off, which meant their time together was precious and sporadic. But he made every moment count. Coffee dates that turned into long walks, dinner at his apartment where she discovered he was a surprisingly good cook, late-night phone calls when he was on shift and couldn't sleep. And through it all, Ashley felt herself falling. It terrified her. She kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, for the feelings to fade, for reality to set in and show her that this was all just some kind of trauma-induced fantasy, that she'd latched on to the first person who'd made her feel safe after the worst night of her life. But the more time she spent with Christopher, the more she realized that what she felt had nothing to do with the fire. She loved the way he laughed at her terrible jokes. She loved the way he remembered every little thing she told him, her favorite flower, her irrational hatred of olives, the name of her childhood dog. She loved the way he talked about his grandfather, his job, his dreams. She loved the way he looked at her like she was something worth looking at. She loved him. But she couldn't bring herself to say it. Because what if she was wrong? What if this was all in her head? 5 weeks after the fire, Ashley finally found an apartment. It was smaller than her old one and further from work, but it was hers, and that was enough. Christopher helped her move in. There wasn't much to move, some donated furniture, a few boxes of clothes she'd bought with her insurance payout, the essential kitchen items Megan had insisted she take. But he was there anyway, carrying boxes up 3 flights of stairs, assembling her new bookshelf, hanging the single piece of art she'd managed to acquire. When they were done, they sat on her new couch, the only seating in the entire apartment, and looked around at the empty space. It's a good place, lots of potential. Ashley laughed weakly. It's depressing. I used to have things, books and pictures and stuff I'd collected my whole life. Now I have one couch and a bookshelf with nothing on it. You'll fill it again. It just takes time. I know. She trailed off, struggling to find the words. Sometimes I wake up and I forget. For just a second, I forget what happened, and I reach for my phone to check the time, and then I remember that my phone is new. and my nightstand is new, and everything is new because everything I had is gone. Her voice cracked on the last word, and suddenly she was crying. The tears she'd been holding back for weeks, the grief she'd been too busy to feel, all of it came pouring out in ugly, gasping sobs. Christopher didn't say anything. He just pulled her close, tucking her against his chest, and let her cry. His hand moved in slow circles on her back, steady and soothing, while she fell apart in his arms. I could have died. I was so sure I was going to die. I couldn't breathe and I couldn't see, and I thought that was it. I thought I was never going to see my mom again or finish my stupid life or... I know. But you're here. You're alive. You made it. Because of you. If you hadn't come when you did, I would have... Don't think about that. You're here now. That's what matters. She cried until she couldn't cry anymore, until her eyes were swollen and her throat was raw, and she felt hollowed out, but somehow lighter. Christopher held her through all of it, never trying to fix it or talk her out of it, just being there. When she finally pulled back, sniffling, she found him watching her with an expression of such tenderness that it made her heart ache. Sorry, I got your shirt all wet. It's okay. I have other shirts. She laughed, a watery, hiccuping sound. You're really good at this, you know, the comforting thing. I've had practice. We get training in crisis support, but honestly, most of it is just being present, letting people feel what they need to feel. Do you ever feel it? The crisis, I mean. Or does it just roll off you? Christopher was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was lower, rougher. It doesn't roll off. Every call stays with you, one way or another. The good ones, the bad ones, the ones that haunt you. You learn to compartmentalize, to function even when you're carrying all of it. But it doesn't go away. What haunts you? He didn't answer right away. Ashley watched the struggle play out on his face, the desire to share warring with the instinct to protect her from the darkness he carried. There was a call about 2 years ago. House fire, middle of the night, just like yours. Family of 4. We got there fast, but not fast enough. I got the parents out and one of the kids, but the other one... He stopped, his jaw tightening. She was 7. Her name was Emma, and I was 20 seconds too late. Ashley's heart broke for him. Christopher. I dream about her sometimes, about what I could have done differently. If I'd been faster, if I'd gone left instead of right, if I'd just had 20 more seconds. It wasn't your fault. I know that. Logically, I know that. But logic doesn't always help. He took a breath, seemed to steady himself. The point is, I don't take a single save for granted. Every person I get to carry out of a building, every life that gets to continue, it matters. You matter. Ashley reached up and touched his face, her palm against his cheek. He leaned into it, his eyes closing for just a moment. Thank you for telling me that. I know it wasn't easy. I wanted you to know. I wanted you to understand why I do what I do. Why I couldn't just let you walk out of that fire station and never see you again. Why couldn't you? He opened his eyes, and the look in them made her breath catch. Because from the moment I saw you, something in me knew. I can't explain it. I've saved a lot of people, Ashley. I don't remember most of their faces, but I knew I was going to remember yours for the rest of my life. Ashley's heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. This was it. This was the moment. And she knew, with sudden crystal clarity, that what she felt wasn't trauma bonding or gratitude or some psychological glitch. It was love. Real love. The kind that built something lasting. I need to tell you something. Okay. I've been scared. This whole time I've been waiting for this to stop feeling real. I kept telling myself that what I felt for you was just because you saved my life, that it was gratitude or attachment or some kind of survival response. I kept waiting for it to fade. And it hasn't faded. It's gotten stronger. Every time I see you, every time we talk, every stupid little moment, it all just makes me more sure. She took a breath. I love you, Christopher. Not because you saved my life, because of who you are. The records and the grandfather stories and the way you remember my favorite flower. I love all of it. I love you. Christopher stared at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he smiled, that warm, genuine smile that she'd been falling for since the first day at the fire station. I've been wanting to say it for weeks. I just didn't want to scare you off. You love me? From the moment you showed up at my station with homemade brownies and the worst cover story I've ever heard. I wanted to say thank you properly. You could barely look me in the eye. She laughed, relief and joy bubbling up inside her. You noticed that? I noticed everything about you. I still do. He kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promise. Ashley melted into it, into him, letting herself believe for the first time that this was real, that it was going to last, that she'd found something worth holding on to in the ashes of everything she'd lost. But not everyone was as certain as they were. Megan was supportive but cautious. I just want to make sure you've thought this through, she said one evening, watching Ashley get ready for a date with Christopher. You've known him, 6 weeks? And you met him during a massive trauma. That's a lot of emotions to sort through. I know how we met. That doesn't make what I feel less real. I'm not saying it's not real. I'm saying it's fast. And I'm saying that sometimes our brains convince us we feel things because we need to feel them, not because they're actually there. Ashley put down her mascara and turned to face her friend. She understood the concern. She'd had the same fears herself, but she'd worked through them. She knew the difference now. I thought about this a lot. I've questioned everything I feel over and over. And every time I come back to the same answer. I love him. Not because he saved me, because of who he is. Megan studied her for a long moment, then sighed. Okay, I believe you. I just needed to hear you say it. Christopher faced similar skepticism from his colleagues at the station. She learned about it in pieces, through comments he made and stories he told, though he always tried to protect her from the worst of it. What do they say about me? Your friends at work? He hesitated, which was answer enough. They're worried. It's not about you specifically. They don't even know you. It's about the situation. Dating someone you rescued, it's complicated. There are ethics involved, power dynamics. Some of them think I crossed a line. Did you? Cross a line? I don't know. I've asked myself that 100 times. You were vulnerable when we met, traumatized. Some people would say I took advantage of that. He paused. Do you feel like I took advantage? Ashley considered the question seriously. She owed him that, and herself. No, you didn't pursue me. I came to you, remember? I showed up at your station with brownies. You could have just said thank you and sent me on my way. I wanted to. Part of me knew it would be smarter, cleaner. But you didn't. I couldn't. You walked through that door and something in me just recognized you, like I'd been waiting for you without knowing it. I felt it too. They sat with that for a moment, the weight of it, the improbability. Two people who never should have met, thrown together by fire and fear, building something real from extraordinary circumstances. I don't care what they think. Your colleagues, my friends, anyone. I know what this is. I know it's real. Christopher reached for her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. So do I. The first time Ashley met Christopher's family was at his mother's birthday dinner, 3 months after the fire. She was nervous, unreasonably nervous, considering that she'd survived actual flames. But Christopher kept her hand in his the whole drive there, squeezing occasionally like he could sense when she needed grounding. His mother, Diane, lived in a modest house in the suburbs, the kind of place with a well-maintained garden and wind chimes on the porch. When she opened the door, Ashley saw Christopher in her face immediately. The same blue eyes, the same warm smile. Mom, this is Ashley. Ashley, this is my mother. Diane looked at Ashley for a long moment, then pulled her into a hug so tight it pushed the air out of her lungs. You're the one. You're the girl my son can't stop talking about. He talks about me? Mom. Every phone call. Ashley said the funniest thing today. Ashley made me try this new restaurant. Ashley, Ashley, Ashley. I was starting to think he'd made you up. Ashley laughed, some of the tension draining out of her shoulders. I'm real. Mostly. The dinner was wonderful. Chaotic and loud and full of the kind of love that only families could generate. Christopher's younger sister, Rachel, grilled Ashley about everything from her job to her opinions on reality TV. His older brother, Michael, made terrible jokes and embarrassed Christopher with childhood stories. And through it all, Diane watched with a knowing smile, clearly delighted that her son had found someone who made him happy. After dinner, while Christopher helped clean up, Diane pulled Ashley aside. I want to thank you for what you've done for him. Me? He's the one who saved my life. I don't mean the fire. I mean everything after. He's different since he met you. Lighter, more present. He carries so much weight from that job, and sometimes I worry he's drowning in it. But with you, he's himself. The boy I raised, not just the firefighter he became. Ashley felt tears prick her eyes. I love him, more than I knew it was possible to love someone. I know you do. I can see it in the way you look at him. And he loves you the same way. Diane squeezed her hand. Welcome to the family, sweetheart. 6 months after the fire, Ashley's life had been rebuilt from the ground up. Her apartment was no longer empty. It was filled with new books, new pictures, new memories. She'd won her case against the landlord, thanks to Christopher's cousin's wife, and the settlement had given her enough financial security to breathe again. She'd started a new job at a larger nonprofit with better pay and more opportunities. She'd even adopted a cat, a fluffy orange tabby named Ember, that Christopher insisted on calling the world's most ironic pet. And through it all, there was Christopher. He was there, on the good days and the bad days. There when she woke up from nightmares about smoke and couldn't fall back asleep. There when she got the promotion she'd been hoping for and needed someone to celebrate with. There in all the ordinary moments, cooking dinner together, arguing about what movie to watch, falling asleep on the couch and waking up tangled in each other. She'd never had anything like this before. She'd dated, sure, but nothing had ever felt like this, like finding the missing piece of herself that she hadn't known was missing. One evening, they were at his apartment, listening to records on his grandfather's turntable. Ashley was curled up on his couch, a glass of wine in her hand, watching Christopher flip through his collection with the same care he'd show handling evidence at a crime scene. "What are you looking for?" "Something special, for a special occasion." "What occasion?" He didn't answer, just pulled the record from the stack and placed it on the turntable with practiced ease. The needle dropped, and the opening notes of a song filled the room. Something old and soft and romantic. The kind of music that belonged in a different era. Christopher crossed to the couch and held out his hand. "Dance with me." "There's barely room to dance in here." "There's enough room. Come on." She took his hand and let him pull her up, let him wrap his arms around her waist while she rested her head against his chest. They swayed more than danced, barely moving, the music wrapping around them like a blanket. "This is nice." "It is." They danced through the whole song, and then the next one, and the next. At some point, Ashley stopped thinking about how ridiculous it was to slow dance in a cramped apartment and just let herself feel it. The warmth of his arms, the steady beat of his heart under her ear, the certainty that this was exactly where she was supposed to be. When the music finally faded, Christopher pulled back just enough to look at her. His expression was serious, almost nervous, and Ashley felt her own heart start to race. "I need to tell you something." "Okay." "I've been carrying this for a few weeks now, trying to figure out the right time. But I realize there's no perfect time. There's just now." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Ashley's breath caught. "I know it hasn't been that long. I know how we met was unconventional. I know there are probably 100 reasons why this is too fast and too soon and too crazy. But I also know that I've never been more sure of anything in my life." He opened the box, revealing a simple, beautiful ring, a single diamond on a delicate gold band. "Ashley Brennan, you walked into my fire station with brownies and changed my life. You made me believe in something I'd given up on. You showed me that love doesn't have to make sense. It just has to be real. And what I feel for you is the realest thing I've ever known." Tears were streaming down Ashley's face now, but she couldn't look away from him. "Will you marry me?" For a moment, she couldn't speak, couldn't do anything except stare at this man, this incredible, wonderful man who had carried her out of a fire and then kept carrying her through every challenge and doubt and fear until she was standing here, whole and happy and more in love than she'd ever thought possible. "Yes, yes. Yes, 1,000 times yes. Yes, I'll marry you." Christopher's face broke into the biggest smile she'd ever seen. And then he was sliding the ring onto her finger and lifting her off her feet and spinning her around the tiny apartment while she laughed and cried and held onto him like she'd never let go. When he finally set her down, he kissed her, deep and long and full of promise. And Ashley knew, with absolute certainty, that this was her happy ending. Not because he'd saved her from a fire, but because he'd seen her, really seen her, and chosen her anyway. Because he'd taken a chance on something that didn't make sense on paper, and trusted that the feeling was enough. Because he loved her, and she loved him. Their wedding was small, just family and close friends, held in the backyard of Christopher's mother's house on a perfect autumn afternoon. Ashley wore a simple white dress. Christopher wore his dress uniform because how could he not? When she walked down the makeshift aisle, past their teary-eyed families and beaming friends, she thought about how different her life was now than it had been a year ago. She'd lost everything in that fire, every possession, every sense of security, every belief that she was safe in her own home. But she'd gained so much more. Christopher was waiting for her at the end of the aisle, and when she reached him, he took her hands in his and looked at her like she was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. Hi. Hi. You sure you want to do this? I've never been more sure of anything. The ceremony was short and sweet. They exchanged vows they'd written themselves, his making her cry, hers making him cry, both of them laughing through their tears. They exchanged rings, they kissed while their families cheered, and then it was done. They were married. At the reception afterward, while they danced their first dance as husband and wife, Christopher leaned close to her ear. Thank you. For what? For coming to the fire station that day. For taking a chance on something that didn't make sense. For believing that what we had was real, even when everyone was telling us to be careful. Thank you for coming into that burning building. For staying. For waving at the ambulance like you couldn't bear to let me go. I couldn't. I knew even then, somehow, I didn't want to lose you before I'd even found you. You saved my life that night. You saved mine too, in a different way. She kissed him then, in the middle of the dance floor, while their families clapped and whistled around them. It wasn't a perfect kiss. They were both smiling too much for it to be perfect, but it was real, and that was enough. That was everything. 1 year later, Ashley was standing in the nursery of their new house, watching Christopher assemble a crib with the same focused intensity he brought to everything he did. Do you need help? I've got it. You've been saying that for 2 hours. The instructions are in Swedish. They're in English. You're just too proud to read them. He shot her a look that was probably supposed to be annoyed, but came out affectionate instead. Ashley grinned and lowered herself into the rocking chair they'd bought last week, her hand resting on the swell of her belly. She was 6 months pregnant with their first child, a girl they'd learned 2 weeks ago. They were going to name her Emma, after the little girl Christopher couldn't save, so that something good could carry her name forward. It had been his idea, offered quietly one night after a difficult shift, and Ashley had agreed immediately. It felt right, like closing a circle. Done. Ashley looked up to see the crib standing fully assembled, if slightly crooked. Are you sure that's stable? It's fine. I'll tighten it later. Our daughter is not sleeping in a crooked crib. She won't notice. She'll be an infant. Christopher. Fine, I'll read the Swedish instructions. She laughed, the sound filling the small room, and Christopher crossed to her, kneeling in front of the rocking chair so he could press a kiss to her belly. Hi, Emma. Your mom is being bossy. Your dad is being stubborn. Can you believe we're doing this? Having a baby? Being parents? Sometimes I still can't believe any of it. That we found each other, that we made it work, that we're here. Christopher looked up at her, his blue eyes full of everything he felt. Love and gratitude and wonder and the kind of happiness that seemed too big to be real. I can believe it. I've believed it since the moment I carried you out of that building and you opened your eyes. I knew, Ashley. I knew we were going to end up right here. I love you. I love you too. Both of you. He kissed her belly again, then stood and pulled her to her feet, wrapping his arms around her carefully, mindful of the life growing between them. Come on, let's go make dinner and leave the Swedish instructions for another day. Sounds perfect. They walked out of the nursery together, hand in hand, leaving the crooked crib behind. There would be time to fix it later. There would be time for everything. Because they had found each other against all odds, built something real from extraordinary circumstances, and proven that love, true love, the kind that matters, doesn't need a perfect beginning. It just needs two people willing to carry each other through the fire. And they were. They always would be. Did you like the story? Do you want a part 2? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Also, comment which state you're watching from so I can give you a shout out in the next videos. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel so you can stay updated on our next uploads. Thanks for watching!